welcome everyone, and thanks for having a look at this interview on ISO 9001-2015 DIS, the Draft International Standard. My name's Jim Moran of SimplifyISO.com, and this is Mohamad Fawaz, Managing Director of CAMTS. Welcome, Mohamad.
Yeah, welcome, Jim. How are you today?
Fantastic, beautiful day here in Ottawa. We're off to a good start.
Well, how better to start a good day on quality? This is the best thing to do in every day. Start always with a word on quality.
A word on quality.
Yeah.
The quality word.
Yeah.
So you and I have both had quite a bit of experience with all four versions of ISO 9001.
Yeah, since 1987.
1987, worked with the 94, 2000, 2008, the whole gamut. And I'd have to say, this particular standard has certainly come a long way since those first days. One of the things I've noticed, of course, is the fact that it's now more inclusive for services than it's ever been.
Yeah, you're right. They moved from only products to products and services. So that will encourage all service business to see that this standard is not only for manufacturing people, but is for everybody. This is the intent, and now they are confirming it by saying products and services.
And of course, even as with the old standard, it is just when you say everybody, there's a company in Guelph, Ontario that has one person, and they're actually ISO certified.
Sure.
And then we have clients, you have clients who have over 1,000 clients.
Sure. And
then there are certainly certified organizations with tens of thousands of employees as well. So it certainly runs the gamut. One of the things I noticed, we all noticed right off the bat, was the new structure. Did you want to mention anything about that?
The existing structure of the ISO 9001-2008 has 8 clauses in it. But the new structure is based on a new directive by ISO, IEC, Appendix SL, saying that all management system standards now will have the same structure. So they will have all 10 clauses instead of 8. All right? So this will facilitate the integration of systems together. So now 9001, 14001, 22000, 27001, whatsoever management system standards developed by ISO will be having the same structure, 10 clauses based on the Plan, Do, Check Act, as you know.
Excellent. The Plan, Do, Check Act has certainly had a good test since the post-war era when Deming introduced it to the world and had considerable success in Japan, bringing them to the head of the quality world in terms of, well, you know the list: automotive, pharmaceuticals, optics, technology, and so on. You and I noticed that the first 3 clauses are the same: scope, normative references, and terms and definitions, although this particular version, unlike the last 4, has 68 or 69 definitions in it, and we only had, well, really they didn't even have one official definition, just a note that the word product could be replaced with service if you were a service industry. Didn't help much though. Then the first thing we notice once we get into section 4 is this thing called context. Previously we just had to state the scope and tell what we did, kind of figure out what kind of documentation we need. Have you had much experience working with your own clients at defining what the context is? What are you seeing there?
You see, in the existing standard, 9001-2008, companies were supposed to have a quality policy taking into consideration the nature and context of the organization. But people were not really going really to the extent of looking at all the context of the organization.
I used to see quality policies, for example, I still see them today. They don't even state exactly what the company does.
Yeah, exactly.
So now I think we have to go a little bit further in that.
Yeah, so now they want the organization to go and look at its internal context and external context. So all the work environment where the company is working, the needs of the interested parties, and that's something new in the ISO 9001-2015, though the scope would still be to satisfy customers, but you have now to know the needs. What is emerging? What are the trends in your business? What the competition is doing? So you look outside, to be able for your quality management system to work effectively on the long term. So you need effectiveness on the long term, and you need sustainability of your quality management system for the survival of the business.
This is definitely a new concept, the idea of not just getting things in place to get a certificate, but build a management system. You might even call it a business management system as opposed to just a quality management system, especially when you blend in 14,000 and possibly the new, I think the new version of OHSAS 18,000 is a couple years away, but I think it's 45,000 or some number up in
the ISO are looking
perhaps
to have a new standard
Yes.
on occupational health and safety management system.
So that would be part of the context as well. And then from there, like the other standard, you kind of build your system from there. There's a new section called leadership, and I know you've done a presentation for us at ASQ here in Ottawa on leadership. What did you find interesting about that particular clause?
You see, in the existing standard 9001-2008, we had the management commitment.
Yes.
Okay, and it's based on the quality principles, and one of the quality principles was still the leadership.
Leadership,
right?
yes.
So it was the intention for the 9001-2008 that management commitment is about leadership, but it was not probably that clear. So now what they have done, they said, okay, instead of only management commitment, we need leadership from top management. So leadership means top management is now requested to play a better role and a higher role in the setting and developing of the quality management system by engaging people, directing people,
Yes.
and motivating people, and directing or leading the innovation process of the
Yes,
organization.
brand new word in the
Yeah,
standard.
so-
Well, even engaging and motivating, those words never appeared before.
Yeah, so
And as I recall, as we know, 2008 has 5 specific requirements to demonstrate commitment, and this one has 11.
yeah,
So managers will definitely have to understand much better what the system is for, how it's working, and I think it'll help leaders, I hope it helps leaders at least, realize that they can have quite an impact on how an organization operates.
and one of the impacts that they need to have is for the top management, the leadership, is to make sure other leaders in the organization, other managers, they play their leadership role in improving and making sure the system is effective. And that's very important in this new standard. And you can tell us about like how they want leadership to make sure that the quality management system is integrated within the business processes.
Well, as you said before, you could very easily, after implementing this, start to refer to it as a business management system. It isn't something extra you do after your day's work is done. This is how we do business.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that that there's more emphasis on leadership will also help over time build management systems that actually bring much more value to the organization. Not that ISO 9001, the first 4 versions, didn't bring value, but now I think leaders themselves, business owners, presidents, CEOs, and so on, will actually start to see tangible results, especially if they get good at the performance evaluation piece that we'll be talking about a little bit later.
So what are, in your view, Jim, the main changes that you have seen in the standard, in the new standard?
Thanks. In fact, the section after leadership, in the planning section, we see 2 monster benefits coming to companies through meeting these
Not
requirements.
monster, I mean big one.
Big ones. Well, big. Yes, good point. Good point. Big benefits coming through in the planning section through risk assessment and risk management, number 1, and change management.
Oh, yeah.
Those 2 things together are worth the price of admission, in my view.
Yeah.
If you didn't do anything else with your current system other than just add those 2 pieces, there'd be a huge leap forward in that word you used earlier, effectiveness of the management system. And of course, it's going to bring huge value to organizations that embrace this change management and risk management, because they'll certainly be able to avoid all kinds of problems that could pop up that they would then have to react to, but now they can be proactive with. And this section here might even be worth talking about the removal of the previous clause that was called preventive action. So these 2 pieces will help certainly put people's minds at ease who were real proponents of preventive action, it's all still there. In fact, the entire management system now is considered to be a preventive action tool.
System. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So though some people were looking and hoping that the quality management principle would include one principle on risk approach,
Yes.
but it's not in the principles yet. But if you look at the new standard, in the introduction, they have put a paragraph on risk approach thinking.
Yes.
So that's very
Yes.
important, that they want companies to think about risks, because the whole purpose of the system is to sustain the organization on the long term. So what could impact on the survival of an organization are the risks that might be in the company, in the organization, that we don't know about.
Mhm.
So if we identify those risks and we put controls for them, then we are really preventing problems
Mhm.
from happening in the organization, and preventing all kind of risks that might be there. So this is, as you said nicely, that the preventive action clause is not there anymore in the standard, but the whole standard and the whole notion of introducing risk in the new standard is about prevention.
Mhm.
So there's no need to really have a clause on prevention, it's all there. So do they want people to really go into the full-fledged risk management?
There is a very clear statement in the standard that addresses that question specifically, and the statement reads something like, the standard does not require a formal risk management methodology, or doesn't be documented, anything like that. But it's like anything else, the more you put into it, the more benefit you'll get out of it.
Sure.
There is an ISO standard, if any of you are just kind of wondering, where the heck am I going to figure out how to do risk analysis and risk management? There's ISO 31000, and there are literally tens of thousands of articles on the internet talking about risk, how to approach risk. And of course, you know from the automotive industry and the aerospace industry, this FMEA, or failure modes and effects analysis, FMEA, has some great ideas on how to put together. And really, if you simply start with what's the likelihood and what's the impact, even just like a 4-square box, that's better than nothing. And then you can stretch it out from there depending on how.
Actually, a lot of organizations now, with the existing standards, when they have adopted the process approach to the system, when they flowcharted their processes on the steps of their processes, many of them have already indicated in their process approach system that, well, for each process, not necessarily step by step, but at least the big picture of risks of each process. And if we do that, that would be a very good start. So each process, because as you know in the new standard, as it was in the existing standard, the standard is based on the process approach.
Yes.
Okay, so when you identify your processes and you make sure those processes are in place, you can go to each process and say, for that process, what risk I might have. And then, as we discussed on the context of the organization, you can also identify risks related to the interested parties' needs, risks related to your internal context, risks coming from the external context. So that will help the organization really be ready for any surprise that might happen, and have an answer to that surprise, so they do not have trouble, and their quality management system would be really effective in this way.
And they will actually really be managing. They won't just be reacting to bizarre things that are happening. They'll get things under control. And now, and putting it in that context too, there are a number of places throughout the standard that talk about the application of the process approach, management, explaining and making sure the process approach is understood, even in that section on knowledge. Knowing about how the whole management system works, plus knowing what the process approach really means to individuals.
So basically now in the new standard, the process approach is really very clear, okay? That they have asked people to really identify the processes, the inputs to the processes, the outputs to the processes, and they talk about the results, the output of the processes, and how to manage these processes effectively, and to identify risks into those processes, and resources needed for these processes, and roles and responsibilities, process owner. So the process approach is now very, very clear, and The most important part here is that leadership must make sure that the quality management system processes are integrated within the business processes of the organization.
And the business strategy as well. We need to be able to go from sort of the quality policy to objectives, to targets, to action plans. And those action plans, again, bring us back to something that's new. You recall in the 14,000 and 18,000 standards that we've both worked with, the requirements went beyond just identifying aspects and just environmental goals and health and safety goals. That standard already has had us creating action plans to hit the targets and putting things in place, timelines and so on, responsibilities. I was really glad to see that particular requirement added to the quality version, because I did it with my clients anyway, and I usually taught it that way in the training courses that we deliver.
We all had the understanding that whenever you have a quality objective or any objective, it will not be achieved if there is no program or an action plan to achieve that objective. That will include responsibility, timeline, resources, whatsoever. So as you said, in the 9001 2015 is very clear.
And it sort of followed Einstein's comment that his definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over but expecting a different result.
Yeah, it's true.
So now if we want to achieve a different target, we have to do something differently.
It's like when I say I want to reduce my weight, but I keep doing the same thing.
That's right.
I'm not going to reduce my weight.
That's right.
To reduce my weight, I have to change my way of eating.
That's right.
or exercising or whatsoever.
Yes, and that's exactly the point. Nothing will change if you don't change what you're doing.
Yeah.
And the whole support section, very similar to what we've seen before. There won't be any surprises for our visitors there. Infrastructure, the human resource pieces in there, talking about knowledge now.
This is something new.
Yes, the knowledge.
You would like to talk about that piece?
Yep. I will just finish up on the work environment being the same as before, but there is a new approach definitely for personnel, human resources, and so on. If you'd like to just
so in the support, which used to be the resource management in the existing standard, now they, instead of saying human resources, or they talk about people. So they have a sub-clause on people. So which means that, yes, not only human resources in terms of hiring and competency and whatsoever, we have to make sure that the people we have are competent and they are motivated, engaged, into the process, and the quality principle involvement of people now is changed to engagement of people.
Yes.
And that's a very important thing to see. And then you have into the support also a new clause on knowledge management, which is a very important issue, because an organization cannot survive and continue to act properly and be effective if they don't have a knowledge management system. The standard doesn't really ask for knowledge management, but at least know what knowledge we need for our quality management system and how we capture the experience and all the knowledge and the lesson learned from the implementation of the system, so we can make sure that we have enough knowledge to continue this business.
And continue to grow the business and improve, of course. That brings us to a point of one slight word change. In the existing standard, it talks about document control and record control. And now in this standard, it refers all through the standard to a thing called documented information.
Yes.
And there are two words that go along with that phrase, documented information. One of them is to maintain documented information, and the other is to retain documented information. And if you read a little bit about the sort of explanation and so on of it, and by the way, there's a very good annex, fairly good annex in this standard, complete with a separate couple of pages on support documents for the standard, a number of guidance documents and some other actual standards as well. The retaining of documented information is what you'd probably be used to as record control. The maintaining tends to refer to things that you'd likely think of as procedures, work instructions, operating methods, and so on. Not a huge deal, which also brings us to the point that when people say, well, this is really going to be a pain, I'm going to have to restructure my entire management system, you won't have to change a thing. There's no requirement anywhere in any of the ISO standards that says you have to use their terms or use their words or structure it in any particular way. And so that brings us back actually almost to the operation piece.
Just to continue on what you just
Yes.
said on documented information, there's no need now, there's no requirement now in the standard for quality manual,
Yes.
which is a very interesting issue. So companies can decide to have documented information about your system in any means they want.
Mhm.
So there's no really need for a quality manual, but a quality manual would be a good thing to do. However, if you do not want to have a quality manual, that's fine, all right?
Mhm.
And another thing on the leadership that we need to talk about is the roles and responsibilities in the organization.
Yes, yes.
And the existing standards, we have something called management representative.
Mhm.
That notion of management representative, it's not there in the new standard. However, it's required that management will assign responsibilities and authorities to manage the system, to identify the processes, to report to top management,
Mhm.
and to suggest improvement. This is exactly the role of the management representative in the existing standard. Yet, but they don't call it now management representative. And that's very good, because they want probably to say this is a function that we need to do. So each organization can call it the way they want to call it, as long as it's there.
Plus, they could spread it amongst
More
two or
than one
three
person,
teams.
yeah.
And I think ultimately that's going to be a huge benefit for the person that currently is called the management rep, because I've seen organizations, I'm sure you have too, where all of a sudden whatever happens becomes that person's problem.
Yes.
And that's never a good thing, because everybody's involved. As Red Green said, we're all in this together, and everybody has some kind of impact on quality in an organization.
That's very good, yes.
The section sort of which is the heart of the whole management system, and the part that the public sees or our interested party sees, this thing called operation. I didn't notice any real monster changes in there.
No,
Did you
but
see anything
it's still, I
unusual?
mean, like the operation, which is clause 8 now in the 9001/2015, used to be the clause 7 of
Yes.
the existing standard, and this will take us to the exclusion that
good point.
companies
Yes.
that in the existing standard you need to implement the whole standard, except if you have any clause that's not applicable to you, and just to be limited to clause number 7 of the
Clause
existing
7,
standard.
yes, yes.
Now, it's still the same, all right? You have to implement the whole standard in your organization. However, if something is not applicable to you, you just have to specify why it's not applicable to you and justify exclusion.
Mhm.
But then this time the exclusion will not be only from clause 8, it will be from clause 8 and from clause 7, because calibration now is in the support clause 7.
In support,
So, but still is the same thing.
Mhm.
But as you said, yes, there's no big difference in operation, except that instead of calling purchasing, now they call control of the providers.
Yeah,
Okay, external providers
of goods and services.
of
or
goods and
products
or product and services. So they replaced purchasing by the management or control of external providers.
Mhm.
So suppliers, subcontractors, anyone supplying anything or providing anything to the organization needs to be under control now.
That's an excellent point, because the new wording, in my view at
Yeah.
least, seems to be more inclusive of, as you said, services in particular. The old standard just said purchasing, and
Yeah.
naturally we thought of, tangible goods.
Tangible, yeah.
And of course, you and I both deal with service companies, and we've been accustomed to this interpretation for a long time. But for people just becoming introduced to this, it might be interesting to see how they react to this idea of external providers. One last thing about the Section 8.
Operation.
It now includes, Section 8 operation now includes design and development,
Yeah.
but extends that concept to your own processes, designing of your own processes. And what's interesting too is that where the current version design requires 5 records, the new standard in Section 8 under the design and development only requires 3. They've kind of combined the validation, verification, and somewhat of the changes involved. A couple of records there have disappeared. So it's, in one way, much lighter, and you mentioned it already, but I'll just remind people. There are no requirements anywhere in this standard for any documented procedures like there have been in the past. 20 in the first one, 6 in the second version. Nevertheless, most of the people I work with will have documentation, but it might actually allow people to start thinking a little more broadly about how they document things. They can use pictures. You mentioned flowcharts already. You can use a checklist as a work instruction. Videos. Videos are popular. Just remember with videos to have a few frames at the front end with the document control requirements met there and so on. But it's, I think this area for sure people will be quite comfortable with. And performance evaluation.
Let me just say one thing on the operation of the design and development process. One little change is that in the existing standard, the design output is supposed to give inputs to production and purchasing. In the 2001-2015, they are saying that the design process, not only the output, must give information on how to design production and purchasing. So how to make your process of production. So now if you're not design responsible, but you have someone designing your product or service, you need to take the output of the design or the result of the design process and design your processes for production and for delivery and for purchasing and whatsoever, which is, it used to be there, but it's clarified in a better way now. So that's a very important issue here.
Excellent. And that leads us right to performance evaluation.
Yeah, performance evaluation, you still need to do internal audit, you still need to make customer satisfaction, feedback, you still need to evaluate your external providers now, not only suppliers, you still need to evaluate your processes. And now they introduce the concept of key performance indicators. Though most companies used to have that, but now it's clear in the standard, they have used the word key performance indicators, all right? And so then you need to monitor the processes, through your key performance indicators, and they have introduced something very new. I mean, not very new, it used to be there, but it's now explicit. Non-conformities related to processes, not only non-conformities related to products. And that's very good in the performance evaluation.
This might be a good time to remind everybody of the definition of a nonconformance, which is non-fulfillment of a requirement. So if you have requirements in processes, requirements in timing, requirements, legal requirements, regulatory requirements, and so on, they can all be now considered nonconformances. And it might actually help people see trends a little bit better if they follow the guidance that's in here. And again, nothing except for the subtleties that you mentioned, and thanks very much for clarifying those. The performance evaluation is, I think people will recognize pretty much everything in there. And that brings us to the last new clause, clause number 10, improvement. Nothing spectacular there except a little, in one place they removed the word continual, but there is a subclause called continual improvement. And as before, comes from not finding nonconformances, finding opportunities to improve processes. And in fact, there are a number of places where even though the word or the clause specific requirement for preventive action has disappeared, there are a number of places in the standard where it actually talks about opportunities for improvement, which is what I usually call preventive action, like finding something before it goes wrong. And of course, there's always the old 1-10-100 rule. If you find a problem at the input stage, you can fix it for $1. If you don't find the problem till the process stage, you've already got time, energy, people time, machine time invested. You can still save it, but it'll cost you $10. And if you don't find it till either the service has been delivered or the product's on the shipping dock, then it'll cost you $100. So there's the 1-10-100 input, process, output. So the more you can be monitoring your processes and be proactive and finding things and finding ways to make improvement, the more likely you'll be to have some advantage come to you from being proactive rather than reactive.
And nice to mention this issue of opportunity, because the standard talks about risks and opportunity.
Risk and opportunity.
Not
yes.
only risk, all right?
Yes.
So you have, because when you take risk, you have an opportunity to do something and to gain something. And just to go back to performance evaluation, now management review now is part of performance evaluation, which is nice. All right, so this is all what you do, okay? And then you go to improvement after you have done all your business and you have evaluated. So then you go to the improvement, and still the improvement is based on the root cause analysis.
To kind of bring it all together, I see some tremendous opportunities here for folks to improve how they use ISO 9001 to manage their business, run their business, improve their business. Any final thoughts?
Well, I think we have covered all the changes and major changes in the new standard. Of course, there are other minor changes, like for example, they might have communication in a separate clause, and instead of having it included in one clause. For example, customer communication used to be under the customer-related processes, and internal communication. So now they have a communication clause that for everything, internal and external communication. So you might have some changes like that in the standard, but these are not really major changes. But I think we have covered the major changes in terms of context of the organization, the leadership role, the risks management, all controls, change management, the new support on knowledge and things like that. All the operation and the performance evaluation and the improvement. So I believe that these are the main changes, and the making sure that quality management system processes are integrated within the business processes, and they are in line with the objectives, strategic goals of the organization.
Absolutely.
All right. So that's the main changes of the standard, and I'm sure companies will be able to do that. One thing that we need to take into consideration here is that companies will have 3 years to upgrade to the new standard. So the new standard will be out in September, probably 2015. So companies will have 3 years to do that, but they don't have to wait until then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The changes between the DIS and the final international standard over the next year will be so minimal that there'd be no harm in starting right now, especially to take advantage of risk management and change management immediately. You don't have to wait for another minute to get started on that. And for a little bit more information, you'll see a couple of websites here on the screen. The CAMTS website, the simplifyiso.com website. Feel free to stop by. There are places there you can send us comments, send us questions. Thanks very much for joining us. Excellent.
One more thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
One more thing to just before we finish that, just to tell everybody, a lot of training would be required for the 3 parties involved in this quality management system: the clients to be certified, the consultant, and training providers, and the auditors. As there are so many new concepts in the new standard, all of us are supposed to take training to get the knowledge needed to understand and grasp the new requirements of the standard, so we make sure that we are doing a good job in terms of putting the system in place from the client, and with the help of their consultant and training providers, and from the auditors, that they need to really know how to audit these new clauses of the standard so they can benefit, so companies can benefit from it. And this will mean that really we are gaining from this, because we bring in the knowledge to everybody, improving the knowledge of everyone involved in this business.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim.
We'll
it was my pleasure to do this with you today, and then hopefully people are benefiting from what we have said.
Excellent.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you.